Right, so we're going to go ahead and record this, and then that way we'll put it up on our website when we're all done, as long as everything goes smoothly, and then you can refer back to it if you like.
Awesome.
All right, so our next slide. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the CSUSB guidelines, which are fairly new, as using AI in theses, projects, and dissertations is fairly new. So we're going to talk about the guidelines that the university has put together for graduate students, and then what steps you need to take when you're going to be using AI in your work, and some of the risks, some things just to be aware of when you're using AI. So is everybody here even aware that we had guidelines? If you want to raise your hands, I know a lot of people probably didn't know. Doesn't look like it. So don't worry if you didn't know, because this is fairly new for all of us. All right, next slide. Unless you had something to add there, Nathan.
On the previous slide, just as a heads up, I mean, we'll also cover, some of the differences between APA and MLA. The different academic styles are different in the way that they approach working with AI. We'll talk about how to cite AI when you're quoting, paraphrasing, using images, graphs, tables, that kind of stuff. Also talk about requirements for disclosing work with AI, such as when you're translating, editing, brainstorming, doing data analysis. And then we'll just circle back, like Shelby, on this issue of risks of using AI and the importance and the ways you can go about doing your best to safeguard your academic integrity, and that's through documentation and disclosure.
All right, thanks. So yeah, so what do we mean by AI? We're talking about generative artificial intelligence. So things like ChatGPT, Google Assistant, any apps you're using for content creation. For a while, even Grammarly was showing up when we will run things through turnitin.com. Grammarly was showing up as AI generated. So just telling you to make you aware. So examples of using AI in your paper might be things like maybe you're using it to generate tables and figures. Maybe you're using it to make some revisions or checking your grammar. Maybe you're using it to launch your research and narrow down your research topics. So that's mainly what we're talking about here. Oh, there's more. So the Graduate Council has developed guidance on using AI in theses, projects, and dissertations. The Graduate Council is different representatives, different faculty from the different colleges on campus. A lot of them are also in charge of graduate programs. And so as we saw more and more people beginning to use AI in their papers, in their theses and projects, the council decided to put together some guidance for you. So just be aware that this is, fairly new, and it's likely that this will change in the future as things evolve. So I'm going to go over our current policy with you. The current guidance is called CSUSB Guidance on the Use of Generative AI in Theses, Projects, and Dissertations. It is on our website, our graduate studies website, in our section for graduate coordinators, so faculty. And the document was written more from that perspective for guidance for faculty, but you're welcome to take a look at it if you want to download that or just read it online. But I'm mainly just going to go over the parts that would really pertain to students. So in the guidance, it says, students who plan to use generative AI tools in researching or writing their graduate thesis, project, or dissertation must always seek and document in writing unambiguous approval for the planned uses in advance from their supervisor and supervisory committee. So I'm going to explain what the steps are for that, because that is quite a mouthful. And also, just to keep in mind, it also says unauthorized use of generative AI tools for scholarly work at CSUSB may be considered an offense under the policy on upholding research integrity. So what does all that mean? Basically, you're going to implement all of that this way. What it's saying is that you want to be transparent with your faculty and with your readers on your use of AI, and you want to plan ahead. So if you're thinking of using AI in your paper, you want to meet with your faculty advisor or your committee chair, that person that you're working with most closely on your thesis, and you want to discuss how you're going to use AI in your paper. So before your meeting, you really want to think it through, be prepared for that meeting, think about your ideas on how you plan to use it, try to be as specific as you can, and then discuss it with your advisor or committee chair. So once you guys have agreed on how or where you're going to use AI, you want to make sure to get their approval in writing, like it says in that grad council document. That's to protect yourself and also to have clarity in case there's any questions that come up down the road. You can go back to that document. And then you want to also understand their expectations on how to cite or note the use of AI in your paper. So citing it, putting it in an appendix, it may be a little different for each program, but that's something that you want to talk about with your committee. So again, agreement and transparency, those are the keys. And each program is different, so we don't have a specific agreement that you would fill in yourselves. You're going to meet with your professor. Some programs, probably computer science and MSIST, but I'm just kind of guessing, are probably more familiar with using AI than other programs. They may even have a process in place. So check with your program. And once you've reached an agreement, you're going to want to get it in writing. So if you're in a program, say, that doesn't already have a process in place, a suggestion is that you kind of just follow up with that faculty member with an email. I know it would be awkward if you went to your professor and said, here, I wrote this contract, will you sign it? You don't need to quite go that far, I don't think. But follow up after your meeting, and maybe in your email you say, hey, from what I understand, our meeting, such and such a date, we discussed using AI to generate these tables or process this data. And, please email me back and confirm that I've got this right. Something like that, then you've got it in writing. It gives your faculty member a chance to have that in writing as well, and also clarify anything if there's a misunderstanding. And then just make sure to keep that email for your own records. So transparency, besides being transparent with your faculty member, you also want to be transparent with your readers. So part of that transparency is citing AI in your paper, and knowing what your program's expectations are for citing. Some may want you to have documentation, but keep it in a side. Some of you may want things in the appendix, and Nathan will be able to go over that with you a little more detail than I can. But make sure to include that discussion with your faculty member as well. And I think that's about it for me. Anything you want to add there, Nathan? Oh, wait, I have another slide. Sorry about that. So if you're wondering, why do you need approval? Again, we do, you don't want to get yourself into trouble. So again, it does say unauthorized use of generative AI tools for scholarly work at the CSUSB may be considered an offense under the policy on upholding research integrity. So again, you want to make sure that your faculty are aware. You don't want them to be in the dark if you're using AI in your paper. You want to be on the up and up. You don't want it to be discovered later on. So it's important that you get that approval ahead of time. And if you've already started your papers, because I know a lot of you probably weren't aware of this, now would be the time to talk to your professor and say, hey, I didn't realize there was this process in place, but this is what I've done, or this is what I'm planning on doing, just so that you get that done before you send it to graduate studies. Are there any questions on any of that so far? Feel free to just unmute yourself. I think somebody put a question in the chat.
Just asking about getting a recording of
Oh, yes.
a copy of the recording or the slides.
Oh, yes. We could send that out. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. So I'm going to turn it over to Nathan.
Okay. So Shelby has covered sort of the policy and procedures side, and I'm going to go a little bit more into the details of when you're writing within a particular academic style. And most theses at CSUSB are formatted in either APA or MLA, and there are some that are also formatted in Chicago, right? But of course, grad studies has their own, formatting requirements, but most people are doing your citations and most of your other, you know, disclosure work and networking and connecting with resources via one of those three main academic styles. There are other styles, of course, but these are the two biggest ones that we see, and so these are the ones I'm going to go over in a little bit of detail. So just know that whatever academic style you're working with, APA, MLA, Chicago, or others, that the approaches are going to differ. They're going to be different, and there's some of them are significant, some of them are just in the details, but they are going to be different. So I want to go over a little, I know Shelby covered some of this stuff already, but a little bit of technical vocabulary. Those of you in computer science may laugh, but for those of you who are not in computer science, prompts, right? What does this word prompt mean? And some people are most accustomed to hearing this word in conjunction with a faculty member providing a writing assignment or some other kind of, homework assignment, right? That's your prompt as a noun. Or you could prompt somebody, meaning you ask them a question, right? And that's basically what it means here, but it's becoming a little bit of a technical term. This is the things that you are entering into the AI that it then is responding to and generating in response to. Yeah. If you have questions about that, you can unmute or you can jump in the chat and throw it out there. Output or content are terms for things that AI generates, right? So those are some of the words you're going to hear bouncing around here. And also, we all kind of maybe have an idea of what a hallucination is, but as a technical term that is in the stages of developing in the language, right? Hallucination is when AI makes up information that is not true. So examples of this might be attributing work to an author who did not write it, or attributing work to an author who does not exist, right? So you may ask the AI a question. It may say, oh, this was, put together by so-and-so person. That person may not exist. That piece of writing may not exist, but it tells you that it does. This is becoming the bane of the existence of libraries. There's librarians and writing center tutors across the country who are experiencing people coming in asking questions about, I need to find this source so I can cite it properly. The source does not exist. It has been hallucinated by AI. So that's an important technical term. So another thing just of importance, and we'll come back to this throughout the presentation, is that all work with AI of any kind must be disclosed in all of these academic standards. There may be other academic styles that don't have that requirement, but in MLA, APA, in Chicago, they do want disclosure of any kind of work that you do with AI. Okay, so using AI, what does this mean? Now, me telling you how to use AI might be like me telling you how to use a book. I mean, every single field, every single student, every single researcher is going to have different ideas of how to use it and what to do with it, right? So I'm just going to give you a very brief synthesis of what's one thing you could do with it that would be a good thing to do, right? So here's an example of some data that we collect in the Writing Center. We have post-session surveys that we ask students. So survey data, analyzing survey data is a little bit of a pain, right? And so one of the questions that we ask when students come in is this one: how did you hear about the writing centers? And we make this sort of choose as many as you want option in our survey. And when those fields come out, you'll see that they're divided. So some people may say they heard from a friend. They may say they heard from a professor or instructor. They may say that they heard from a friend and a professor and instructor, right? And so when we're analyzing that data, if somebody chose 4 different things in that one field, it can be a little bit of a pain in the butt to do that analysis. And so AI might be able to help you with that. Another question that we ask about is which of the following issues did you work on with a tutor? And we give students a long list of different issues that they can choose. And so again, we may have clarifying an assignment, discussing whether your draft met the expectations, grammar. You may choose 5, 6 different things that you did in your appointment, right? And so for us, analyzing that data, figuring out which things that somebody did in any given appointment, it's not as easy as just sorting and searching, right? Because we've got multiple things happening in each field. So This is something that might be good if you're in a field where you're doing survey data and you want to get a jump start, a start on doing some analysis of the data that you're collecting. Maybe you could use AI. So you might go to ChatGPT, and then you might have a little conversation, and it might go something like this. Can you help me understand trends in my data? I need insights into, and I have my face covering that so I can't see it, into patterns and potential outliers. And then ChatGPT may jump back and say, sure, please upload your data file and let me know what specific trends or insights you're looking for. Are you interested in time-based trends, correlation, outliers, or something else? Oh, how helpful. Thank you. And so then you might reply, here's my spreadsheet. I'm looking for trends in how students hear about the Writing Center and trends in what kinds of issues they work on and any related interconnected patterns and trends in that data, right? So this is my prompt. This is my interaction with ChatGPT. This is what ChatGPT is saying back. So let's see what ChatGPT has to say. Now, before you just throw in your spreadsheet, right? I collect a lot of sensitive data here in the Writing Center. I collect students' names. We collect information about their student ID number. They may tell us what their major is. And if I just thought, oh, yeah, I'm just going to get some help with AI, and I'm just going to throw that spreadsheet into ChatGPT and have it give me some information about it. Well, I just fed all that sensitive information into ChatGPT, and once you fed it in, there's no feeding it out. There's no getting it out, right? It's just eaten my data that I have now fed into a system that presumably somebody could recreate, right? And there's all kinds of interesting things happening with that. But you don't want to be disclosing information that's sensitive in that kind of a way. So if you noticed, and why would you notice? Because this isn't your data, but I just took a smaller subset of my survey data. I removed all the students' names. I removed all their student ID numbers. I removed any kind of identifying information. And all I kept was the very general multiple choice fields. How did you hear about us? Why did you come in? What kind of things did you work on? So that there's no possible identifying information that exists, right? And so this is just one important point. When you start working with AI, you have to be careful, not just what you do with what comes out, but you have to be careful about what you put in. You don't want to be putting sensitive information into it that you don't have permission to disclose, right? Especially at a university, there's lots of laws about that. Don't be sloppy about that. Okay, so ChatGPT is going to come back and say, okay, I've looked at it, I've analyzed it. Here's what I've got to show you. So let's see what it does. The dataset contains information on how students heard about the Writing Center, how the Writing Center was conducted, sessions, the type of writing they worked on, the issues they addressed during the session. Yes, those are the fields in my survey that I uploaded, only those fields. So what can you tell me? Since some responses contain multiple selections separated by this bar, I'll process them to analyze trends. And I'm going to look at trends in the most common way students heard about the center, the most common writing issues that they work on, and any correlations between how they heard about the center and writing issues that they worked on. I'm going to break those down and analyze frequency distributions. Wonderful. That sounds great. It would take me forever to do that, just sitting and plunking around in Excel, right? Okay, so boom. 5 seconds later, here comes ChatGPT. How do students hear about the Writing Center? Well, the top number one way that they hear about us is from a professor or instructor. Students' number two reason, or that they had heard about us, is that, well, they've already been to the Writing Center before, they're returning. 40 out of these say that a tutor came to their class, or they heard from a friend 31 times, right? The Writing Center website has mixed reporting, 20 direct mentions of our website, 18 variations of information about our website, and then there's a bunch of other things that come up but don't really come up with any frequency. So things like academic advisors, not really a significant source of referrals to the Writing Center, flyers, brochures, peer mentors, social media. It's not showing up in the data of how people are actually coming in and what they're citing as their reasons. Okay, so interconnections and trends. Students who hear about the center from a professor or a class visit, they tend to focus on assignment clarity and structure. So they came in, they said that a professor sent them, or that they heard about the Writing Center from a professor, and then there's a trend that the people who hear about us in that way tend to work on these kinds of things, right? And so then it gives us a little bit of tentative analysis, right? Professors might refer students struggling with assignment comprehension. Well, I know from Writing Center perspective, many professors refer all of their students and they tell their students, no, it's not about struggling, it's about writing as a process, right? So here's ChatGPT with a little bit of bias throwing some information in there. That's not correct, but it isn't interesting that that's its perspective. Classroom visits might encourage students to seek guidance on formatting and citation. Well, that is certainly one of the things that we focus on, right? And then an interesting point, returning students focus on different things. Returning students tend to focus on advanced concerns like revising their organization and strengthening their ideas. So this likely indicates that once students become familiar with the center, they use it for deeper writing concerns. And I would say, yeah, good analysis there, ChatGPT. That vibes with everything we know about writing centers. Is there a question, Shelby, coming in? I think I maybe hear something. No? Okay. I thought I heard something, but I don't hear it now. Okay, so there's a little bit of an example of how you might work with AI, right? Ask it some questions, give it some data, and then it's going to spit some stuff out. So depending on your field and what you do, it could look radically different, right? We know that AI is being used in all kinds of crazy different things. Just reading an article about some researchers using AI to try to figure out how bacteria are developing antibacterial resistance, right? My wife is working in a biochemistry lab at La Sierra University in Riverside, and the students are working with making modifications to proteins. They're training in AI so that the AI can figure out how do proteins fold, how do proteins work. And students are doing that research to train the AI so that then the AI can more productively look at different proteins and figure out, okay, how do these function? How might these fold? How might these work in this context or that context, right? So every different field is going to use it in a completely different way. And so you have to think about all the different sensitivities of doing any kind of research in your field, and then how AI working with that might come into play, right? So if you're using APA, right, work with AI within your writing process has to be disclosed and cited. So if I was writing a research paper on the Writing Center and it was going to be in APA and I was going to use that analysis that it did for me, or even just that jumpstart on analysis, right? I have to somehow say now in my paper, hey, I used AI to jumpstart my analysis and it helped me identify some trends, right? If that's all I do, I still need to disclose that, and anywhere that I use it, I need to cite it. So APA says that you should do this in your methods section. If you do not have a methods section, for instance, if you're not doing an experiment, but you're doing a survey paper, or a literature review, something like that, an annotated bibliography, then you probably want to do that in your introduction. So normally you're going to want to do it in your methods. If you don't have a methods section, do it in introduction, and specify how you worked with AI and where that work appears in your writing project, right? So APA wants you to say, what you did, where it shows up, and that needs to be disclosed. So note that writing for scholarly publication in APA must include the full output of material produced by AI within a section for supplementary materials/appendices. So anything that is going to be published according to APA must include a full output of material produced by AI. So all theses, dissertations, and projects submitted to graduate studies are published on ScholarWorks by the campus. And so APA then would seem to imply that what you must do is all of those transcripts that you saw that I reproduced for you of me chatting with ChatGPT analyzing my stuff and giving me information, all of that not just has to be disclosed, but it also has to be collected and then attached to my actual writing in an appendix, so that people can see what exactly it was that AI produced. So it's important to know that AI tools are obviously evolving and changing, and that, as Shelby noted previously, that the best practices and requirements regarding this kind of work with AI are developing and changing, right? The rules that we have for the road today may change tomorrow, right? That's just the way it is. So our recommendation in the Writing Center is that in order to safeguard your academic integrity, keep the full output of all work with AI. Keep it all. Don't just take the important part. Don't just take the quote you want. Don't just take the information that's interesting. Anything that you do with AI, keep it all. And diligently and transparently document how it was produced, and then also how it was integrated with your writing process. Okay, and we're going to come back to that point. But that means if you're just using it for grammar checking, if you're just using it to, you have some awkward sentences and you want to paste those sentences and say, hey, can you give me some suggestions on how I might revise the sentence to make it a little bit more clear? I would suggest that you save your document before you make any of those changes. I would suggest that you save the entire transcript, the entire interaction that you have with the AI, right? And if it's for publication for a master's, APA says you must do that and disclose that. And then I would also keep a separate document of your document after you have made those changes and after you have cited those changes and after you have integrated into that document, so that if questions do arise, you can show not just your final thing and say, oh yeah, I used AI, but just on this. No. Now you can say, look, here is my document before I used AI. Here is the stuff that AI spit out. Here is what I have integrated into my document. And then you are fully covered. fully documented, right? Document, document, document. And that is going to be your best bet, because if the rules change and the rules change mid-process for you, you don't want to, you don't want to get, off the beat and not know that, something has changed and you're not doing it in a way that is now required, right? And it's just good practice. So citing AI.
Nathan.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So we're talking about taking quotes directly from ChatGPT, but more recently, I think it's been in the past few months, they modified it where you can click the global button, which basically accesses internet actively. Then, if you ask it, if it didn't already provide it, which sometimes it does, the resources where it got the information, which is amazing because obviously you can back up what the information is, where it came from. Do you, or I guess there's two parts of this question. First would be, do you only quote directly where the resource came from? So if you're not pulling it from ChatGPT and then you find the resource and then go directly to it, that's almost like a expedited version of Google, right? Like you're finding the source, but you're not taking it from ChatGPT. You're going to the source to read it, identify it, and get it yourself. Is there then my second question would be, do you then have to back up that quote with, I originally found it through a recommendation of ChatGPT, and therefore here is like a one tier citation for ChatGPT, and then almost like a sub citation for the information that you officially got from the source document. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. So note that there are two different types of work with AI. One is, like you're saying, citing, right? And we haven't really even gotten into the citing part. But work with AI is one thing. Using the content generated by AI is sort of a different thing. So if you are using AI and it is helping you find sources and then you are citing those sources, your citation should be of those sources, right? So if you go to the library database and you're finding journals and you're looking up articles, or if you're using Google Scholar or whatever it is, the library database, is incidental, right? The thing that you cite is the thing. The whole purpose of citation is to help your reader to find and connect with, make connections to that original research, that original resource, so that they can then investigate it themselves. They can make connections themselves. They can use it, read it, explore other avenues, right? So the whole point of citation is to connect your reader to sources that you have connected with. So yes, you would just want to cite that source, but as the APA guidelines and MLA guidelines say the same thing, whatever you're using AI for, any work with AI in your writing process must be disclosed, right? And any content that you use must be cited. So if all you're using it is to ask questions, develop ideas, figure out which way you want to go, and then ask it for sources, and then it's providing you those sources, then I would say all you have to disclose is, hey, I used AI just to find sources to guide my brainstorming, in some kind of process like that. But even if you're not quoting anything, even if you're just then finding those sources and using those sources, the letter of the law in terms of APA does say that that you should disclose that. Now, why would they want you to disclose work with AI to find sources? But they wouldn't ask you to disclose work with librarians. They wouldn't ask you to disclose work with Google or Google Scholar, right? So it's new. This is the way, right? As the Mandalorian would say, this is the way. And I think it's partly annoying on the part of the writer, but also it's, I think, in many ways intended to protect you as the writer. The better that you're documenting all these things, any questions that do arise, you're insulated by keeping those records.
Okay, yeah, it's extremely insightful. I'm sure we're going to get more in depth with this, and I've already gone to the website for APA to later read this information for myself. But excuse me. In terms of the citations, on the specific topic only that we just talked about, is there a general way of citing ChatGPT, or does each then have to be broken down? Like, I found this resource, then I have this reference, and then, so the point I'm getting to, are you going to end up at, ultimately, if you've referenced ChatGPT 25 times, are we citing 25 individual instances, or is it, I utilize this resource and it helped me draw conclusions or find resources, and it's one citation? citation. And again, you might get into this, but my brain's just working here. So.
Yeah. So if you look, we have here an in-text citation example, right? And I'll just read this paragraph very quickly. So we're assuming somebody is writing a paper about working with AI in this instance. So when prompted with, quote, how does the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis apply to writers using AI?
Okay. I want to
ChatGPT
say
produced.
I didn't put any candy.
Shelby, can you mute us again? Thanks. Quote, if the AI has particular biases or tendencies in its language output, writers may unknowingly adopt or be influenced by these patterns in their own writing, right? End quote. And then we have our parenthetical citation, OpenAI 2023, see Appendix B for the full transcript. So while this accurately captures concerns about the adoption and influence of unrecognized biases, the if framing of such biases as being possible rather than necessary fails to acknowledge that all language is inflected with bias, including the sources of ChatGPT's training and clearly its own advice, right? So here we have content from OpenAI, right? That is the writer of this algorithm. And here is a quote. This is something that AI produced, and that's why it's in quotes, right? And so if I am citing this source and I have a quote, there it is. Now, in the same paragraph, right? And this is the same rule set for AI as it would be for any source. Let's say you're working with analyzing a play from Shakespeare. You're not going to write out a full citation for every single time that you work with a little tiny word or a quote from the play that you're analyzing, right? You might have 15, 20 different little things that you're pulling in a given paragraph. But the way that APA works, the first citation must be the full citation, and subsequent citations that it is clear that the citation refers to the same source from the context, right, can use a reduced citation. So what that normally means is if you're citing a play and you cite page 5 and it's written by this person and you have all that information in there, your second citation, well, you've already said the author, you've already said the year, you've already given all that information. So now you can just give the page number, right? Now you can just give the page number and you don't need that full citation. So that same citation practice would be in place for AI. It's the same rules. So if I'm citing multiple quotes from this ChatGPT conversation, the first one will get this full citation and then subsequent ones would get a reduced citation. Now, in a reduced citation, there are no page numbers for this. So as long as it's super clear from the context, I could just keep quoting and just keep pulling those quotes in. And hopefully it would be clear from the context within that paragraph that those are all subsequent citations of the same source. If at any time that you are unsure, right, it's always best to overdo it than underdo it. But in any case where you're citing the same thing multiple times within a given paragraph and the context is clear, you don't have to produce a full transcript, right? A full citation. But don't forget that there is a difference between quoting and paraphrasing, right? Which is the example that we have here for this in-text citation example, and general work with AI. So if you are using it for editing purposes, if you're using it for researching and brainstorming and that kind of stuff, that content may never appear in your paper in an identified individual space that needs a citation that would be quoted or that would be paraphrased. If I don't use any of those results from that little synthesized data analysis that it does, I just use that to get my brain going, and then I go do my own analysis and come up with my own numbers in a little bit different way. I may never need to quote any of that, but I still would want to disclose it in my paper, in my method section in APA, to say, hey, I use AI to do X, Y, Z. I'm not using it in my paper. I'm not using quotes. I'm not using the content that it generated. I just use that to get myself thinking about how to do this or whatever it is, if that makes sense. Does that sort of start to address your question? It is tricky because it's easier when you're working with paper sources that have page numbers or journals that are digital that have page numbers, because you can then just put the page number in. But if it's a digital source that does not have a page number, it's a little bit harder to see what those reduced citations just look like nothing, right? And then I see there's another hand raised and I can't see whose it is. Go ahead.
Armando has a question. Yeah. Go ahead, Armando.
Thank you. Why not have a requirement for an inventory or a list of prompts, all inclusive at the end of the paper?
Why not? Well, APA does. They require you to provide all work with AI in an appendix. So you will actually do exactly that if you're writing a paper in APA for publication.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. You will. All work will be included in an appendix for APA. But any place where you're quoting or paraphrasing or anything like that, you need that direct citation. So it's actually visually, this is pretty straightforward, right? I've got my quote and I've got my citation there in the parentheses. It looks just like a normal APA citation. Let me show you what it will look like in the references page. So on your references page, it will look like this. The author space, which is the first part of your citation, is filled by the author of the algorithm. So they're saying that's OpenAI. Then you need to put in a date of the version. So what year did that version come out? And then the name of the model serves as the title in the spot where you would normally put a title, like a title of an article or something like that. You're going to also then include the version in parentheses and a description of the model in brackets. So you'll see for ChatGPT, we've got ChatGPT. This was version 3.5.0, and then a description. It's a large language model, and then a source where you can access the model. So then there is your link. So that is how for the APA. ChatGPT work that we did in this sort of synthetic thing for the presentation. That's how I would cite that in my reference list for APA. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
MLA, go ahead, Kyle.
Back to Armando's question, actually, to piggyback that, does that mean that as you were previously speaking about the transcript from the communication between AI, would let's say you have a topic, we'll just use this, right? Like you have a thread on OpenAI and you're researching OpenAI as a company and you spend X amount of time and you have this transcript. Is that then going to be completely attached? Like, because you were saying, right, like download it, show what was done in AI, and then you have that as a reference. But is that to Armando's point going to be a full transcript at the very end or in the references sheet, or as you also said, appendix, where you would see every question, prompt and response, right?
So if it's for a master's that's going to be published, APA says that you should have it in an appendix. So that full transcript of all those different sessions should go. And I would keep them very organized. This is the date. This is what I did. This is how, labeled and organized. I would download them, by the day. I would create documentation. Okay, this date, these are my prompts. This date, these are my prompts in the content. And this is the whole, transcript. And then I would put that all into an appendix, depending on how much work you're doing and how extensive it is. You might have different sections of an appendix, but for APA, any work with ChatGPT, any work with any, AI like this, it does want a complete appendix of all of those different things. You don't cite things from your appendix, and like if you're quoting, if you're paraphrasing, you cite those according to the previous slide. But any other general work would just get disclosed in your method section. But yeah, it is asking to have a complete appendix with all of that information.
Okay, very insightful. Last question on this because it popped up. Are we going to get a resource to reference this later?
Yeah, so we'll spit out a what's it called, Shelby? A PDF of this slide presentation. We'll also have a recording of this presentation. And then if you go to the Writing Center website and you look under resources, we already have 2 resource cards one on how to work with AI in APA, one on how to work with AI in MLA. They're intended to be paper handouts, so they're super reduced and very much like an appetizer at a restaurant is to get your appetite going. It's not to provide you the full meal. But the essentials are there. The essentials are there.
Okay. May I didn't want to do this without your permission. Can I share the link to APA's website that has basically like a quick read through on the topic that we're discussing?
Yeah, absolutely. I dropped that in the chat so everybody has that.
Okay.
MLA has a similar site where they go over all of that information as well. I think APA's site is much better put together, much more comprehensive and much clearer. MLA's is a mess, frankly, and I think that there's actually some errors still on it. But that just reflects the nature of the changing, dynamics here. And I think maybe APA people are more familiar than MLA people with these types of tools might be part of it. Armando, did you have another question?
Yes, and for somebody to say very thorough explanation, very much appreciated. I had a question earlier about the use of the data when you plugged in the spreadsheet, and I don't know if I want to derail your presentation. So if you want to keep going, I mean, you can answer at the end. So it's your call.
Let's circle back to it so I can just briefly go over the MLA, and then I don't have anything going on after this because they kicked me off the campus. So I'm happy to stay on and get into the weeds with you as long as you want.
Cool.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is your reference example for APA. Let's see what's next. Okay, so this is MLA. So a few differences. obviously, anytime you're quoting, paraphrasing, using images or other AI content, you got to cite it, right? Anytime you pull in any content that you don't create anywhere, you're going to cite it, right? That's obvious. But again, just like APA, MLA wants you to acknowledge all uses of AI. So if you're using it to edit your work, if you're writing your work in Spanish and then translating it to English, if you're writing your work in English and then translating it to Spanish to get it published in a Spanish language journal, that needs to be disclosed. If you're just using it to brainstorm, right? All uses of AI, they want it disclosed. So where should you do that in MLA? Well, MLA papers aren't going to have a method section. So MLA says, just do it in the text of your writing. So somewhere in your introduction, where it's relevant, where you feel your feelings tell you, somewhere in your writing, talk about it. What did you do? Why did you do? How did you do? Do that disclosure and explanatory work. You could also do it in a note. So that means a footnote, an end note, some kind of, little star. Hey, at the bottom, blah, 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 this, I used this for this and I did this and I edited this, however you think that's appropriate. It also says, or another location. And a lot of people go, what do you mean another location? What does that mean, right? We have some faculty who we see have students sign some kind of like an honor statement before they turn in a paper, even before all this AI stuff. Hey, I wrote all this stuff. It's all mine. I love it. It's amazing. And I'm such a great person of integrity, right? They have students, sign something like that. Well, that might be a new thing for them to integrate. And then also, where did you use AI and how did you do it? And so that might be on a separate, a separate document, a separate statement that is attached almost like an appendix, right? But in MLA, you're turning into a faculty member for just a regular old class, right? You're going to turn in your paper, you're going to have all your normal stuff, and you're going to have this extra document that's going to do that. So in some other location that's appropriate. And if you're working, closely with faculty, which we almost all of us always are, it should be somewhere that they think is appropriate, right? So again, I'll say carefully vet sources that AI cites, as they are often hallucinated or fake. So I'm glad to hear that AI is doing a little bit better about helping, people connect with sources, but still it's a consistent issue that it is making sources up. They would be wonderful sources with wonderful arguments and wonderful documentation and reasoning and legal precedents and all these other things if they existed, but sometimes they don't. So please be careful and please be generous and kind to your librarians and others when you go to them and say, I really can't find this source. Can you find it for me? Well, no, they can't find it. It's fake. If it's fake. AI tools are evolving. So same advice that we had before. Best practices requirements also evolving, right? So to safeguard your academic integrity, irrespective of requirements for anybody or anything, MLA does not require that you attach an appendix of all of your work with AI. They just require citation when quoting and paraphrasing. They just require acknowledgement of uses in your text, right? But my recommendation nonetheless to protect you is keep the full output of the work of AI. Keep a draft of your own writing before you work with AI. Save a copy, pre-AI, right? Pre-AI draft. Go back to 1995 practices and save every 5 minutes. Don't rely on autosave. Save different versions and different parts of your process so that if for some reason somebody comes at you with some kind of, question, you can be like, dude, here's my process. Look at all these different documents. Look at all these different versions. Here's where I worked with AI. Here's my full output of AI. Look how well it's all documented. And then boom, you're scot-free, right? It's kind of like keeping your receipts when you file your taxes, right? I put in solar on my house last year. I just put in for my little solar credit and all it asked me for was one number. And I'm like, how is it that I'm just going to tell you I spent X tens of thousands of dollars on this thing and that's all you want to prove? Obviously, I've got to have my invoice. I got to have my receipt. I got to have my, check stub for all the ways that money came out of my account and went somewhere. They didn't ask me for it yet, and I hope they don't, right? But if the IRS comes knocking, I don't want them to be like, well, look, there's solar up there. I paid for it. Just come on, take my word for it, right? I want to be in that situation with an IRS agent. You don't want to be in that situation with a faculty member or anyone else questioning the integrity of your work. It's guilty, is only upon proof, right? You're innocent until proven guilty, but you still want to do the best to set yourself up for success. So when citing in text with MLA, you will notice we have largely the same paragraph here, but we're just doing it in MLA so you can compare. And note, the prompt is mentioned in the text, right? And so because the prompt is mentioned in the text, how does the superior whorf hypothesis apply to writers using AI? That's my prompt. It's not included in parentheses. So what do you mean included in parentheses? Why would it be in parentheses? Well, in MLA, AI is not to be cited or to be referred to as an author. So MLA is it's a tool, it's not an author, and they are not treating it like an author in the citation process. So normally in MLA, you're going to have your parentheses, or in your text, you're going to mention that author's name, and you're going to have a page number if there's a page number, right? You're going to have that kind of information. Not for AI. What they want you to cite is just like if you are reading an article or reading a poem or reading any other kind of text that doesn't have an author, right? Because they're unknown, because whatever reason, instead of in an unknown author context, putting unknown or anonymous, you don't cite anonymous. That's not helpful. You cite a fragment of the title. That's the normal practice in MLA, and they are carrying that over. So instead of citing an author that doesn't exist, they're having you actually cite the prompt. And to Armando and Kyle's points, MLA papers with significant work with significant prompts is going to be ugly, ugly, ugly. If you're having to put in your full prompts all over the place in place of authors, it's going to be ugly, ugly, ugly. So just FYI, it's not a pretty process, and it's not going to look good. So how would you cite for your works cited page in MLA, right? Note, I've got a red star here. The author is not applicable. They are not putting in anything in the author space. They're treating it as something created for whom the author is not known or for whom an author does not exist, although that is not possible. But so that first author space does not exist. The first thing you're going to have is the title of your source, which is the prompt. Okay. So this is where I say that the MLA site is a mess. Their current description of what they want in this title of source, this blue section, I think what they say about what they want and what they demonstrate in all of their examples are two different things. What they demonstrate that they want is an example, is the prompt. You must include the whole prompt, and then you must give a description of its context. So if, as Armando and Kyle were talking about, you're having a multi-day, multi-week argument and discussion, with this AI, you need to somehow say, okay, this is, one of many follow-up prompts on the question of where you cite your sources, or something like that. They give examples of follow-up prompt asking for sources as the descriptor. For me, this is the only thing I put in there, and that's all it pulled out. And so I'm just writing prompt because that's all it is the prompt. It's not a follow-up prompt. It's not a prompt asking about sources. It's not, a prompt after a long discussion. I mean, I don't know how much context they're really going to want, but there it is. So the other common, MLA, I'm sorry, you normally have an author, not here. Then you have the title of your source. Then you have the title of the container of the source. In this case, that's ChatGPT. Notice it's in italics, just like you would have the name of the journal in italics and the name of the article in regular text. That's exactly like we have here. Article is, what's in blue, and the journal is in that orangey red color. Same idea, right? Then they want the version. So this is the 13 February version. And then the publisher, OpenAI is the publisher. And then that date, it's the date that you actually worked with it and got it to vomit out whatever it is that it vomited out for you, right? So that's the date. It's a little confusing because sometimes the versions are represented with dates. It's the version as of this update date, right? But that's the version date is the version of the AI. And the date is over here in green is the date that you actually created this thing in collaboration with it. And then the location, and that's just going to be your little URL there. They are developing newer tools, and in the future, very near, it may be that you could actually link people to your actual transcript, your actual work with the AI, that you could just put a link in there and be like, hey, go see what I did, as opposed to just putting it as open thing. Things are going to change. It'll be interesting to see what the CSU comes up with in their agreement with all these organizations and how that's all going to function. But recall, again, AI is not to be cited or referred to as an author, okay? Not an MLA. So just to briefly recap, MLA and the Chicago Manual of Style, they require full disclosure and a description of any work that you do with AI. You cite where appropriate, right? If you have quotes, if you have paraphrases, if you're making images, if you're using tables or graphs, you're going to cite that stuff. But even if you don't use that stuff, you need somewhere else disclosure, description, dialogue about your work with AI. Okay. In APA, if it's for publication, same two things, disclosure and dialogue, talk about it, explain it. You're going to have citation where appropriate for quoting and paraphrasing. But if you're publishing, APA wants an appendix, and in that appendix, it wants all prompts and content generated by AI. Okay. So something like your thesis, you're going to have that. So citation details, to be or to not to be an author, right? APA and Chicago Manual of Style, in the function of the details of how you cite, treat AI as if it is an author. MLA does not. Okay, so those are just interesting, we've got MLA and CMS oftentimes are more similar than CMS and APA in different ways, but in this case, CMS and APA, like we already have a way to cite things, and this is how we do it, and so we're just going to pretend like APA and CMS are going to say, AI lives in the author slot. MLA is going, nope, it ain't an author. It can't live in that author slot. So just pay attention to those kinds of details, both in your citation practices and in your text, right? Don't say, AI, authored this thing, or AI wrote this, and that, and oh, what a wonderful idea AI had. No, it's not an author. It can't do that. But an APA and CMS, you can say, oh, it did this, it did that, it did whatever. I'm kind of going in the middle in my example where I say produced. I think that's not clearly author or not author. It's just a description of what happened. So everybody will find their own little ways. So again, AI is not cited as an author in MLA, but it is an APA and CMS. Okay, so risks of using AI, and I think Shelby might want to jump back in here, but I can read over this quickly because we're running short of time. We want to make sure we have additional time for questions at the end. You're required to produce original research or an original work, right? Anything submitted for academic purposes in a classroom is assumed that you're producing original research and original work, more so even for a master's thesis, project, or dissertation. You're also responsible for the accuracy of your work, right? And AI, as good as it is not always right. It can be biased. It can be plagiarized. It can list sources that don't exist. If you're planning for future publication, beware, because if you use AI and you get it all published 100% above board with CSUSB, no problem, and then you want to go forward and publish a different version or an augmented version in a journal, well, some publications don't accept AI-generated work, so just be aware of that. Do your research within your field and the journals that matter to you to know that information so that you don't get caught. Privacy issues, right? Don't use AI to process confidential data. We talked about that. Don't go pasting, no matter how interesting your questions and data, no matter how great it is, until you have some kind of proprietary lockdown safety first version, right? And maybe the CSU will provide that to staff and faculty and students for research purposes, but they ain't got it yet. So, corporations and different people who pay for different tiers may have that for their own internal use, right? But if you're just going to ChatGPT, you can't be doing that. So be very, very careful with the way that you do that, right? And then also, are there legal repercussions for feeding copyrighted material into AI, right? So if you're saying, hey, summarize this article for me, and AI doesn't have access to that article because it's behind a paywall, and you go and take that from a paywall and you go and throw it into AI and ask it to do that work for you. What does that mean? Well, right now it might not mean a lot, but in a couple of years, there are companies like the New York Times who are actively suing, right? Actively making allegations of violations of copyright. You don't want to be on the wrong side of a mega corporation like Disney who thinks that you have misappropriated their intellectual property. Providing data to an AI tool may complicate future attempts to enforce intellectual property protections of your own, right? So you come up with all this great research, you use the AI to analyze your stuff, and then you go out there and you want to, get a patent, you want to file, you want to get a copyright of your stuff. Oh no, you fed it into AI and now it's open domain because it lives on this website, and well, you fed it into this thing and it's eating it and you can't get it out, and now it's vomiting it to anybody who wants it, right? There's lots of different considerations that you want to take into account. Other fun risks of using AI, and I'm not going to click and through and show you all of these links, but they will be there in the presentation, and I'm going to just talk about them as quickly as possible. Using AI without diligent vetting, right? So lawyers are getting in trouble all over the country for submitting legal briefs, claiming this such and such precedent supports my case. The precedent doesn't exist. It was hallucinated by AI, right? They're getting thousands of dollars of sanctions from the court for that kind of behavior. People are going to be losing their law license if they're not careful. So who has records of your work with AI? Do you ever think about that? There is a risk that there will be changes to data keeping and privacy policies and practices, right? So did you know that 23andMe is going bankrupt? 23andMe has a beautiful policy for privacy for your DNA, right? You wanted to know who you were related to because you have some kind of lost, missed family connection. Great. You submitted your DNA. They promised you they would keep it safe. Wonderful. They're going out of business. They're going bankrupt. They're going to sell your DNA. And who are they going to sell it to? They're going to sell it to a private corporation that's going to then turn it over to the FBI. They're going to sell it to some wacko hacker who just wants to know what everybody had. They're going to sell it to insurance companies who want to know what genetic diseases people have that that they then can discriminate against them for in issuing of these kinds of policies, right? Yeah, that data could be sold to anybody. Well, there was a privacy policy. It guaranteed me. Well, guess what? That organization with whom you had that privacy policy doesn't exist anymore, right? So One thing that's interesting that's happening right now, AI companies are coming out and saying, look at how China is using AI to go over Facebook and find dissidents who are using coded language online and using it to find, root out, and then persecute people, right? Look at how AI is being used by people in our country and other countries to develop better scams, to fleece people of money in sophisticated phishing operations, right? Spear phishing or whatever it is. How is it that they know that? They know who's using the tool. They know how they're using the tool. And right now, they're not disclosing that except when they feel like it. But what is to stop OpenAI or any of these companies from creating a contract with the CSU or anybody else and then saying, oh, look, here's a list of all the students and here's their logins and here's all the stuff that they produce. And I can see, oh, this guy was in class at 4 o'clock taking an exam. Oh, well, at the same time, he put all of your exam questions into AI and here's all the answers. Oh, you might want to know that, right? What's to stop them from doing that? Absolutely nothing. And if they're going to make a buck doing it, maybe they'll do it. There's a risk of feeding copyrighted material into AI when you don't have permission. I just talked about that. There are names of people who are suing OpenAI who, if you put their name in your prompt, nothing will come out. There are things about the New York Times. You ask about it, it'll tell you, go away. I ain't talking to you because they're in the middle of litigation and they don't want to touch it. So they've instituted extra safeguards to prevent further legal liability, right? Again, you got to be careful about taking copyrighted material that belongs to somebody else, feeding it into this digital beast, and then using what it comes out of it. Right now, yeah, you're probably nobody's going to notice, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to subpoena those records and that they're not going to find you, and who knows, right? So also note, there is no statute of limitations on issues of academic integrity. If in 10 years, OpenAI goes out of business because some Chinese, clone undermines it, puts their stuff out there for free, OpenAI goes bankrupt. All of their data is sold off, right? They didn't ever do anything to betray the privacy of anybody who ever used their thing, but now they've gone bankrupt, and who goes up and buys some of that data but turnitin.com? The CSU system, the UC system. Somebody else somehow gets access to that database, and now they can see all of this information that was created in AI, who was created by and when. And then they can very quickly and very easily correspond that to their publication databases, and they can see, look at all these dissertations and theses that used AI but did not adequately or properly disclose their use of AI as required by our policy at the time, right? So there's a nice article there about enterprising young academics who are running around flaming their colleagues for issues of data integrity, right? It's only a matter of time before somebody says, hey, I can make a name for myself flaming people who have, master's theses published without adequate citation, right? It could happen in 10 years and there's no statute of limitations, right? Depending on how that policy goes forward, degrees can be revoked, publications can be revoked, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of that. So before using AI, discuss your plans with your thesis committee chair or advisor. Know your program's expectations for using it. Once you come to an agreement with your faculty, get it in writing, even if they don't have a form, even if they don't put it in writing. Send them an email, review it, make sure that email is documenting it, and then you have it in writing. If you're not sure of how to cite, document your use of AI, revisit with your faculty, discuss with them, document those discussions, and then meet with the Graduate Writing Center, meet with the Writing Center. Come and talk to us, and we'll talk about what APA and what MLA say, connect you with resources, and do our best to help you out. All right, last questions. Right at 1 o'clock, but I'm not going anywhere, so if you guys have time, we're happy to answer more questions.
Thank you for everything. This is super insightful.
Of course. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Don't see any questions. If you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. But thanks for coming, and yeah, we will we'll send out I'll send out the slides today, and then the video itself might not be up until tomorrow, and we will put that on our website. Same place where you got all the other information about our writing workshops. So we'll have that there, and you can probably be tomorrow afternoon. They can download that or go there to replay it.
And in the chat, you will see that Kyle put links to the APA style blog on how to cite ChatGPT. APA style blog is a wonderful resource for weird questions that aren't covered in the easy handbook. And he's also got the MLA site on there. The MLA site, like I said, is a little bit of a mess. I'm going to go on there and complain to them about a couple little issues that I've noticed, but it'll get better over time. Thanks, Monique. Thanks,
All
everybody.
right, thank you, everybody.